皆様、おはようございます。
Good morning, everyone. We will now begin the second day of the 62nd Convention for Nikkei and Japanese Abroad. Once again today, as we were yesterday, we are joined by many people. Thank you very much for joining us. I will be serving as the facilitator today. My name is Hiroaki Hirai of the Association for Nikkei and Japanese Abroad. And today also, as it was yesterday, this convention is being made possible by the great assistance of the Kyodai remittance, including the provision of the equipment and the technical environment. And today, the key language of the proceedings will be Japanese, but simultaneous interpretation is available in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Please click the interpreter button at the menu at the bottom of your screen and select your preferred language. And we have one request. Please do not record or capture any video slides or anything shown on the screen today. A recording of this convention will be made available on the Association's YouTube channel later in the various languages. So those who want to relive the experience, please access the YouTube channel. And today, day 2 of the convention, under the theme Towards the Sustainable Nikkei Communities, Practices, and Achievement, we will be holding a 2-part panel discussion. But before that, we will present you a video that has been made to honor former Prime Minister Abe, who died on July the 8th this year. Mr. Abe visited countries where many Nikkei live many times during his term. In those countries, he deepened his friendship with the Nikkeis and expanded exchange programs, leaving a great legacy to the Nikkei communities. We would like to look back on his achievements together. Here is the video.
Prime Minister Abe's foreign policy focused on the Nikkei. During his term, he met and deepened friendship with Nikkei abroad and also expanded programs which became a legacy. It all started with his 2014 speech in Latin America. My travel to Latin America ends here in São Paulo. I take this opportunity to make a promise. I will make sure that Japanese prime ministers and cabinet members will frequently visit Brazil and other Latin American countries. What can Japan and Latin American countries do? There are 3 things. Let me try to express the 3 in Portuguese, although it may sound a bit clumsy. Progredir juntos, liderar juntos, and inspirar juntos. Thank you. It seems that it's gotten across. But these juntos, or being together, these will become the 3 guiding philosophies for Japan's Latin American diplomacy. And I will say this loudly and clearly. Japan and Brazil, Japan and Latin America, juntos, together. For 6 generations, the Nikkei people established trust, and that is the foundation of Latin America's trust in Japan. When we think about the hardships of the Nikkei people, it makes me feel that I need to straighten up myself. The education program for Nikkei Next Generation and the Volunteers for Nikkei Communities program will be expanded. with the help of the Nikkei people in Latin America. We will invest more in Japanese language education. We will support the Japanese language teachers. With the use of IT, we will improve the efficiency of Japanese language education. Let us develop together, and let us work together to make the world a better place. The foundation of all that is our spirits coming together and deepening empathy, and therefore we must put more emphasis on human resource exchange. Let us link Japan and Latin America and deepen our cooperation and with the guiding philosophies. Japan, Latin America, juntos. Thank you very much. In 2015, in an address to the U.S. Congress, he spoke about the late Daniel Inoue and the Lara relief supplies. He visited the Japanese American National Museum. In 2015, he promised to support the Filipino Nisei so that they can regain nationality. 2016, he came to Rio Olympics and he visited the Japan House. In 2016, he became the first Japanese Prime Minister to visit Cuba. In 2016, he visited the Japanese Peruvian Centennial Clinic. He became the first Japanese Prime Minister to visit in 57 years since Abe's grandfather's visit. Times of trouble and hardship, as Japanese and Nikkei, you were always proud, and at times you had to grit your teeth to persevere. In 2016, he laid flowers to the graves of Daniel Inoue and also at Makiki Cemetery. 2017, he visited Davao, Philippines, and visited the Mindanao Kokusai Daigaku. I wish to support talented people like you so that you can work in Japan, Davao, Manila, or in Tokyo.
できるように応援していきたいと思います。
2017, the then Foreign Minister Kishida established a panel of experts on collaborating with Nikkei in Central and South America to discuss future collaborative efforts. A survey on Nikkei communities in Argentina, Mexico, and Cuba was made, and it was learned that new generations and Nikkei with no ties to Nikkei organizations also were aware of Nikkei identity and their roots. 2015, Juntos Japan, Latin America, and the Caribbean Exchange Program started. 630 people took part. 2019, at the 60th convention, then Prime Minister Abe sent this message: "The Nikkei people are our pride. I express gratitude and respect for all of you who have done, for all of you have done in the past, and I ask you to continue to be the bridge between Japan and countries of your residence and help us promote friendship between Japan and countries around the world." I'm really happy that I was able to perform in front of Mr. Abe. I'm happy to know that the relationship between Japan and Brazil is strengthening. I feel the strong ties between Japan and Brazil. It's not just the Nikkei society that is Japonés garantido, but Japanese people also are Japonés garantido. I'm really happy. I think if our motherland is like that, we can also persevere. I didn't think I'd be able to come and see him. I'm really happy. I'm really happy that I was able to see him. I couldn't believe that I could shake hands with him. I met his grandfather, Prime Minister Kishi, in the past. I think he made a wonderful speech. I hope that Latin America and Japan both can prosper and work together for world peace. The Prime Minister's words were beautiful. I heard from my grandfather that Japan is a country where people respect each other. I hope he comes to Argentina. Thank you. The bond between Japan and the Nikkei community will continue. Mr. Abe, thank you very much. May his soul rest in peace.
That was the video to honor former Prime Minister Abe Shinzo. We will now go on to the panel discussions. If you have any questions about the panel discussion, please click the link for the question form in the chat box and send them in through the Google form. Any comments which are not questions can be written directly into the chat box. And if you have messages for everyone, please address your message to all and feel free to use the chat box or the chat function as a forum for interaction. We look forward to your warm messages. Thank you very much for waiting. We will go on to the first panel discussion. The theme is Nikkei Communities Expanding its Diverse Activities. We are joined by 4 people who are active in different areas of Nikkei organizations. Our moderator is Yoshinori Nakai, the executive director of our association. Nakai-san, if you please. Good morning. Or it may be hello or good evening for some. I am at the seminar room of the Association of Nikkei and Japanese Overseas, which is in Yokohama, Japan. The seminar room has been converted into a very elaborate studio. The weather here in Yokohama is very good, with very good clear autumn skies. It is a very invigorating, comfortable Sunday morning. For some of you, it may still be Saturday evening or midnight Saturday. But it is a great pleasure to be able to join and connect Nikkeijin from around the world. Once again, I am Yoshinori Nakai. I am originally, or rather, I am a journalist, and I spent a total of 12 years in the United States and Mexico as a correspondent for a Japanese newspaper. During that time, I met with many Nikkei people. And the first part of the panel discussion, for this part, we are connecting 3 countries, Brazil, Peru, and the United States, with this seminar room in Yokohama, and we will hear presentations from 4 panelists. After that, we hope to hold a Q&A session, during which we will try to deepen the discussions. And as we have been saying, there are many participants from all over the world at the Zoom convention, and we ask the participants to submit your questions and comments through the question form in the Zoom chat box or directly into the chat box. We will try to ask the panelists to answer as many questions as possible after the presentations and to inspire some discussions. And we have several people who participated in the Sustainable Management of Nikkei Organizations, a training course that is offered by the Association of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad, and who are now in Japan. 7 of us have joined us here at the venue today. And we will speak to the former trainees later. The theme of the first session today is Nikkei communities expanding their diverse activities. Yesterday, which was day 1 of the convention, we heard reports from Nikkei communities in various parts of the world about their latest activities. We heard from the young generation many messages from the young generation, and we were able to feel that the generational replacement or change was going on steadily. And we are still feeling the effects of the coronavirus infections, but with the increased use of the internet, many Nikkei communities are launching new projects. And in the first part, we would like to share valuable experiences about what sort of challenges they face in various situations and what outcomes they are producing. That will provide ideas to Nikkei communities around the world as they embark upon new activities. They will provide hints and ideas. And it will also give us an opportunity to reflect more deeply into the overarching theme of this 62nd Convention, Sustainable Development of Nikkei Communities in Japan. I would first like to introduce the 4 panelists in order that they will be speaking. First, we have Daniel Ishihara. He is the co-founder of REN Brazil, a network of Nikkei entrepreneurs network in Brazil, and REN Global, which is comprised of REN Brazil, REN Argentina, Paraguay, and Colombia. He is a lawyer, a jurist, and is a professor of the Superior Education Institute of Brasilia. The second speaker is from Peru, Sergio TOKUMORI, who is the chairman of the Asociación Estadio la Unión, AELU. He is a nuclear engineer, and he has worked as a manager in charge of quality control at a Japanese company. He is a professor of the National Polytechnic University of Peru. And third, Tamiko HOSOKAWA is the executive director of the São Paulo Institute for the Humanities. After graduating from university in Japan, she went to study in Brazil and now is researching Nikkei communities at the institute. And the fourth, Joy Yamaguchi, is the public program supervisor of the Japanese American National Museum, which is in Los Angeles, United States. In 2022, this year, they were chosen by the museum as a 30 under 30 changemaker for their contributions to the Nikkei community. So we will now ask the 4 panelists to speak in order. For those of you participating online, once again, if you have questions or comments, please enter them in the question form of the Zoom chat column and indicate to which speaker your question is addressed to. We begin with Ishihara-san from Brazil. Mr. Daniel Ishihara from Brazil, if you please.
Ohayou gozaimasu. Good morning. Actually, good evening here. Boa noite e buenas noites. It's a pleasure being among you. First of all, I need to ask you if you can see my screen. Everything is okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll be speaking about REN Brazil and as well as REN Global, because this community is now growing. So let me just go forward here. My name is Daniel Ishihara. I'm a third generation Nikkei. I work for the legislative power in Brasilia, capital of Brazil. And I am also an attorney and law professor. During a scholarship granted by Gaimusho in 2019, our group of multinational scholars, we concluded that most volunteers quit their Nikkei and their cultural religious associations during the early professional years and seeking for studies or job-related activities. Some never go back to the Nikkei activities and they become distant from their Japanese roots. So we founded REN Brasil and REN Global to address that issue and bring together Nikkei entrepreneurs from all over the world. REN Brasil is a nonprofit organization. It's managed by volunteers, just like most of Nikkei associations. And our differentials reside in our entrepreneur nature and our focus on multinational relationships. REN Argentina was founded over 10 years ago, but REN Global is still a baby. In 2019, REN Brasil was founded. In 2021, REN Colombia was founded. REN Paraguay followed up in 2022. And now this month, we had a confirmation of REN Bolivia to be founded in 2023. We hope to grow to other countries as well. REN Global has representatives of each nation, and each nation organizes itself in city-based cells. REN Global helps Nikkei leaderships to organize their Nikkei networks and to help everyone's standards and institutional identities comparable to what a franchise does. So each national REN has its peculiarities, but we share an inner core of values and pillars. REN Brasil is focused on Nikkei networking, as you can see in our mission and in our vision. Our motto is empowering people, connecting businesses, and engaging future generations. This motto is based on 3 pillars: education, business, and culture. I have selected a few projects from REN Brasil to show you on the next slide. So we have regular dinner meetings with all of our associates. They are focused on networking. This image shows our former ambassador, Yamada Taishi. He was lecturing to our members on our first meeting, our first dinner meeting after the lockdowns. During the pandemic restrictions, we had regular lectures from numerous Nikkei leaders, such as Shimomura-san from Toyota, Bento-san from Honda, and so many other ones. All of these lectures are available for free on our YouTube channels. Secondly, we host permanent online forum where our members present their businesses and their projects, including cultural and religious events. This year, REN Brasil held our first business trip to São Paulo. Next trip is almost confirmed to our tax-free zone in Manaus, north of Brazil, home of numerous Japanese factories and branches. We have an ongoing partnership ready to offer a business trip to Japan. This is a multinational partnership engaged by Argentina and Brazil. And fourth, among so many other projects, we launched our own discount membership club. This discount membership club includes benefits from a broad range of products and chains all over Brazil, including Japanese language courses and so many others. More members means more bargaining power on discounts, and more companies are attracted to be included in our marketplace. And this illustrates how powerful a united community can become. Another project, this one in the cultural area of REN Brasil, shows how acting locally on many cultural how acting local can actually make a game-changing operation. Then Brazil worked together with Brazilian ministries of the federal government, Japan Foundation, Kanagawa University, and so many others, and the Japanese embassy here in Brazil. And we built our first Brazilian public mangateca. Mangateca is a library of Japanese manga inside our model public library. Whatever happens in the model public library is copied for all the libraries in Brazil, all public ones. This experimental project was so successful that in less than 1 year, we created 9 other mangatecas in other cities of Brazil, more to come in 2023. And this project illustrates how acting locally can make a global change, and shows also that we should always dream of high achievements, even for our small projects. So now that you know a little bit about REN Brazil, I'll just share with you about our experience implementing a Kaigai Nikkei Kyokai training called Management of Nikkei ONGs. Last year, JICA granted me the honor of a scholarship to attend this training program. There were so many lessons that I don't have time to comment so many of them today. We are actually we are gradually taking these ideas to REN Brazil one step at a time, and I will share one story of success and one failure with you. First, our business model canvas, which you can see here in the left corner, was successfully updated with Mizukami Sensei's lesson. We are following his recommendation of periodic reviews, and REN Brazil had special meetings scheduled this month and next month to update our canvas. Secondly, conducting efficient meetings is a top priority, and you can see here in the right side of the screen. Since our volunteers' time is so scarce, and nevertheless our attempts to use these moderation techniques learned from Tsubaki Sensei, they have failed, and we are continuously trying to try new approaches to what seems to be a cultural problem. Participants have reported frustration when facing so many rules for our meetings. We believe that success is not an absence of failure, but the mindset to always get up after each fall and to keep going forward. So let's keep trying to use those new techniques. Lastly, I share with you our ongoing challenges, which are understanding the Nikkei identity, growing our community, enhancing our reach globally, and also adopting some SDGs along the way. SDGs are the Sustainable Development Goals. This picture was taken in REN Brazil's inauguration event at the Japanese embassy in Brazil, with opening statements from both the Japanese ambassador at the time, Yamada Taishi, and Brazilian ambassador in Japan, Saboya Taishi. Domo arigatou gozaimashita. I invite you all to join our media channels and perhaps join our growing Nikkei network all over the world.
Ishihara-san, thank you very much. So REN, a new network of Nikkei going across borders, and also the manga library, it seems quite popular. Japanese manga must be popular. So now moving on to the next one is Tokumori-san from Peru. So good morning to all of you in Japan, and good evening to people in Peru. There is this organization called ALU, which is a organization for the Nikkei community, and there are about 10,000 members. And basically, we focus on sports events. Of course, we also carry out cultural and social events as well. And on top of that, we have the Peruvian Japanese Association, or APJ. And what I would like to tell you is about the Japan Culture Week. In Peru, the Japan Culture Week is held in Peru, and the Peruvian embassy in Japan will also support us, and that's how we carry out this week event. And in 2022, we have celebrated the 50th anniversary of this event, where we try to celebrate Japanese culture, which extend over 1,000 years. So in 1992, the APJ invited the AELU so that more Nikkei people can come together to celebrate Japanese cultural events. So what we do is hold festivals or matsuri events. So we exchange ideas and we consider all the options. And in Japan, we understand that every season there are events to thank the gods for the agricultural and fisheries harvest, and also ward off evil spirits. We understand that matsuri, or festivals, are held to do that in Japan. And therefore, we wanted to do the same. And this idea actually excited the members of AELU. The Matsuri festivals by AELU started with the carrying of portable shrine, omikoshi. And we also had food festival. We also had the sales of souvenirs, and we had shows by artists, Budo events, and we also had cultural and social events. And lastly, we had some fireworks for all to enjoy. And the people from Nikkei school and the Kenjinkai and other organizations of the Nikkei community took part. There were 29 events in the past, and more than 20,000 people gathered. And this became the largest cultural event. And not just the Nikkei people, but also local residents came together to enjoy the event. Everybody unified together, and we tried, we believe we were able to contribute to deepen the ties between Peru and Japan. So face-to-face festivals, we had Children's Festival, Santa Beatriz Jishuro, and CEINE was a co-organizer. We also have the Youth Festival, where the young people enjoyed musicals and dance group performances. And we also have the Central Festival, where Kenjinkai and schools and clubs held parades. We had dancing by women, and also dance to the taiko Japanese drums. And shows were held by famous singers, and ceremonial opening of sake casks were held, and also the mikoshi portable shrines were carried. And of course, finally, we had some hanabi or fireworks. Some programs of the face-to-face festivals. We had the food festival, celebrating the 1,000-year traditional Japanese food, and also we had Nikkei fusion cooking. We also had mochitsuki and other traditional cultural events, and there were many stalls to sell souvenirs. And most of the things sold here were from Japan. Now, what was the effect of COVID-19 in 2020 March? Because of COVID-19, quarantine measures were taken. Therefore, all face-to-face events had to be canceled, and ALU, up until October of 2020, was closed, and all events where people gather has been banned by the government. So you can see some newspaper ads that we've sent out. Just like other countries, nobody was out in the city streets, and people were isolated. However, virtual events through social network started. We had a virtual Undokai sports event, we had a virtual Children's Day celebration, and a virtual Parents' Day event. We also had virtual events to celebrate traditional festivals. So this was pre-recorded. This was a pre-recorded event. So before the virtual festival, we had to prepare. The board gave its approval, and we set up a working group so that we can carry out this virtual event. First, we created a program, and we decided on the date of the virtual event. We also selected the artists to perform. We also asked some guests to give us some remarks. We had to find sponsors, and we also had stalls and food, virtual food festival, and it's all as you can see in the photographs. And based on the protocol, we prepared beforehand. And then this was recorded, and we had the virtual festival. So how did we create the event? The venue was outdoors, and this was in the Central Plaza where people can gather safely. And the professional artists took part, and we also had filming, recording, and logistics set up. And the recording took place on October 31st and November 7th. This photograph just shows you the rehearsal scene. For each program part, in order to make it better, we asked a professional team to edit the final films. And this is about the promotion and advertisement. So 2 weeks before the virtual event, we sent out this advertisement through our fan page. We advertised this. We have a follower of 69,000, and on the day of the event, which is January 14, we had the virtual event, and it was a fake live event. So this is the virtual children's festival, which was also pre-recorded. So we had some cooking events. We had some finger and hand play, and José Garbez, La Victoria, La Unión, Santa Beatriz will often appear in these events. Usually it was a face-to-face event that was held in November, but this is a Seinen no Matsuri, or youth events, where bands come together, and there were some dance by groups, and singers also came to perform. And this is also a virtual event. We had some Budo demonstration, we had some mochitsuki, and A special guest was Beto Shiroma, who lives in Japan. He is a Peruvian Japanese, and also an Okinawa band called HY appeared for this event. And this is a food festival which was held virtually. A Nikkei restaurants became our sponsors. And through our fan page, we promoted this event. So this was done for the Japan Culture Week from November 10th to 15th. And also the baiten, or the food stalls, were also virtual, where Nikkei business activities also were advertised. And this is the results of the virtual events. For the Children's Festival, 24,300 people came to see. For the youth event, 25,300. And for the Central Festival, 37,000 people came to see. And these are the reproduction times. More than 10,000 times they were seen. And also the likes and other reactions. The numbers are shown right here. And on the right-hand side, you see some photographs from the events. Alcance here is the number of people who saw the event and actual reproductions, and then the reactions. So what were the problems or issues that we faced? So these were virtual events. This is a new normal that we have to face, and AELU, of course, we are not professionals, but we try to introduce appropriate technology and other resources, and we had to supplement our budget or reallocate our budget for these events. Because of COVID, we saw that our income was reduced, and we asked volunteer artists to use their free time to record their performances for the event. So this was a volunteer activity on their part. And of course, we followed the biosecurity protocol as we carried out these events. And also we had to consider the curfew that was in place because of COVID. And there were some social, political problems as well. November 14th, in Peru, there was a demonstration going on. And also on the technical aspect, a virtual event was a great challenge for us, but we tried to utilize the human resources and talents that we had. But because of our teamwork and solidarity and volunteer spirit, we were able to overcome them. And of course, there were no spectators for the virtual event. We had to record them with nobody around. And we had to make adjustments for our schedules, and we needed teamwork and also cooperation of volunteers. But because of COVID-19, we had to provide these virtual events in place of face-to-face events. So although we had to face this COVID challenge, we were able to carry out these festivals, the Matsuri events. We overcame hardship and troubles. And with the logistics and people that we have, we were able to successfully hold these events. And this was a great learning experience for us. So Thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. We also have sports event where more than 10,000 people came together. Badminton, baseball, judo, karate, tennis, table tennis, bowling. All kinds of sports could be enjoyed. And just like other social and cultural events, we have these sports events, and we will be holding this in Baraka next. Thank you very much for your kind attention. We can go on to the third speaker, which is Hosokawa-san in São Paulo. Yes, thank you very much. I'm in São Paulo. My name is Tamiko Hosokawa. I'm an issei at the São Paulo Institute for the Humanities. We carry out a survey of Nikkei people of Brazil. We have been doing this survey from 2016, and we try to survey the Nikkei organizations that are called cultural associations or cultural and sports associations. We try to look at the presence at their locations. So please bear with me. So this is a map showing their locations. So communities following a Nikkei lifestyle, of course, people living there were reaffirming and maintaining their awareness and culture as Nikkei. And as a place to express that, the cultural associations and other Nikkei organizations existed. They were rooted in the community, and there were about 430 of them in Brazil nationwide. So the kaikan, or the cultural associations, all were established, and they all have different backgrounds. And so I can't summarize in general, but they mostly have Japanese language schools, sports and cultural facilities, and halls. Among the 430 organizations, 92% had kaikans as the base for their activities. The membership is by household. Most organizations say that they are now at the lowest in terms of number of members, but the kaikans are newly built or extended or renovated, more than 60% of them, and also new organizations are being established. And the membership may be declining, but the events actually spreading. Sometimes they hold the biggest event in town. So these are some of the events, the sports festival, Tanabata festivals, Tanabata Star Festival, and other festivals. And let's look at what happened after COVID-19. This is the 43rd São Paulo Liberdade Festival, the Tanabata Festival. It was held for the first time in 3 years. And this is Bon Odori. And these photographs are from this year. The Nikkei events had a large gathering, but these festivals are being held for the first time in 2 or 3 years, so it really had a large gathering. And this is a Bon Odori in front of a church. Of course, there is no religious element to the Bon Odori. On September 7th, Brazil's Independence Day parade was held nationwide, and this is from Pirapora in Minas Gerais state. The city authority requested the organization to take part as Colonia Japonesa. So you might see scenes that you might find at the museum in Japan, but in 1979, the first Nikkei arrived here. Most of them were from Paraná State. But if you look at the happy coats that people are wearing, they have names of different locations. So overseas immigration and domestic migration happened in Brazil, and that's how the Nikkei communities were established. And the Nikkei community grew together with the nation of Brazil. Now, the Kaikan actually functions as a cultural facility for the whole town. Sometimes they are the only cultural facility in town. And in recent years, the Kaikan will have very strong cooperative relationship with the city authorities. Last week, in Suzano, next to São Paulo, in Boa Vista, an event commemorating the 100 years since settlement was held. 122 households were members of the Kaikan, but right now there's only 38 members right now. However, in 1921, Japanese people who came here became the pioneers of Suzano. And in the 1950s, already this place was known as a Japanese town. And back then, there were strawberry festivals. And the city sees this as an important part of their history. And the Kaikan has now become very difficult to manage, and therefore it is going to be transferred to the city as a cultural asset. That is what I've heard. Now, large-scale Nikkei events are now a whole town event, and the yakisoba fried noodles were a main part of these events. So the Kaikan would sell yakisoba to raise funds, and this became very popular. This is a soy sauce flavored with a very thick sauce. About 70 kilometers away from São Paulo in Ibiúna, a fundraising event for Wadaiko drums was held, and once again, yakisoba was sold. It was a yakisoba tempura, all you can eat at 40 reals. Tickets were sold in advance. About 700 were sold out. And also 100 invitations were sent to 80 sponsors, and about 800 people gathered. So Ibiúna has a population of 80,000, which means that about 1% of the whole population gathered together. So it's all you can eat yakisoba. But they came to support drum performers. And about 60 to 70% were non-Nikkei people. So it's yakisoba, but in Vargem Grande Paulista, at a Kaikan there, fundraising for a Japanese language school was held, and once again there was a yakisoba dinner party. So yakisoba is quite popular, but I think this shows the spirit of support, mutual help, and the culture of giving. So wadaiko, or Japanese drums, this is quite popular among young people, and in Pilar do Sul there was a workshop for wadaiko drums. About 200 children and youth gathered together from the whole São Paulo state. They wanted to enliven the Bon Odori festivals that are held in their cities or towns, and they wanted to learn how to play the drum. And in Curitiba, in Paraná state, the education board chair commented that the wadaiko drums really enriches the culture. Now, some people say that the Nikkei community is diminishing, that Nikkei people are disappearing. We have been hearing this for about 50 years. And of course, assimilation and blending into the local community is very natural. And also, the Nikkei society is changing as the world changes. However, in all kinds of towns in Brazil, we do see traces of the Nikkei people. If you look at the monuments in the city, you see the traces of Nikkei, and also Tanabata, Undokai. These event names are in Japanese. Udon, sukiyaki, these food names, and kaikan, gakko, these location names are also a part of the local language. So it's not simply words used among the Nikkei community. The local indigenous community also knows these words and cultures. People who enjoyed sumo and baseball even the non-Nikkei people will respect the elderly people, the elderly Nikkei people who taught them these sports. And the young Nikkei people, what is it that they cherish about the Japanese culture? I think we can understand that from our surveys. So volunteer spirit, a cooperative spirit, teamwork, consideration for others, being honest, and keeping time. I think these were the keys of being able to hold these large-scale events and also the maintenance of the kaikan. So it's been more than 110 years since the first immigrants arrived and started to live in a totally different culture of Brazil. But I believe these characteristics were leveraged as strength as the Nikkei people took root here. The other day in the southwest of São Paulo state, there was a conference of a federation of 23 Nikkei organizations where gift money was the theme. Donations, celebrations, and condolence money are all called envelope. And this still functions here in Brazil. However, these gift monies just go back and forth between people, and it's meaningless, so we should stop this, some people said. But in the end, this is a way to express people's feelings, and therefore we shouldn't try to put a stop in this. And we shouldn't say how much money should be given for certain events. I believe this is I think people finally agreed that these traditional spirits should be respected. So the Nikkei society is changing, but the Nikkei culture has impacted the Brazilian society. And Nikkei culture is now taking root, and now that culture is being carried by non-Nikkei people as well. The Nikkei community today may be totally different from the Nikkei's community of the past. So in that sense, we might say that the colonia has disappeared, but it may be that just a transformed colonia exists today. So we should understand the diverse nature of the current day colonia. And if we can understand the Nikkei community today, I think that is good. And if the kaikan activities have disappeared in certain areas, still the memories of the past events will remain. With that, I would like to end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hosokawa-san. You researched Nikkei communities across Brazil, so that was a very valuable achievement. And there are some things we have come to know for the first time as a result of your survey. Thank you for introducing your outcomes to us. The power of yakisoba is very impressive. It seems that Brazilians like yakisoba more than the Japanese do. The fundraising power of yakisoba with 800 people and 70% being non-Nikkei, that is amazing. The penetration of Nikkei culture in Brazil is impressive. Thank you very much. We go on to our fourth speaker, Joy Yamaguchi-san from the United States.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. As I mentioned, my name is Joy, and I am the Public Program Supervisor at the Japanese American National Museum, located here in Los Angeles, California. And I'm grateful and honored to be part of this panel today and have already learned so much, so thank you. I want to talk a bit about the Japanese American National Museum. We were founded 30 years ago in 1992 in Los Angeles. It's in the Little Tokyo neighborhood of Los Angeles. And we were founded really by and for the Japanese American community in all of its diversity. And JANM's mission is to promote understanding and appreciation of America's ethnic and cultural diversity by sharing the Japanese American experience. And this mission really is at the root of all of the work we do, from our exhibitions, which are both ongoing and rotating, as well as our educational school visits for all ages, to our public programs, to our collection of over 150,000 artifacts that are housed in our museum. And my role at the museum is to develop, plan, and execute our calendar of public programs or events that are connected to the museum's mission or exhibitions. So I was asked to talk a bit about what JANM did, what that's our acronym for the museum, JANM, did during the pandemic to kind of change and adapt our work for a global audience. And as so many of the other panelists have mentioned, it really was a shift and a challenge that we had to learn how to adapt to. So before the COVID-19 pandemic began, JANM, for its 30 years, had a really lively in-person campus, which you can see on the screen here, that had, as I mentioned, exhibitions, events, hundreds of school children visiting each month, and an active presence in Little Tokyo. But our online presence really was quite limited. We had a YouTube channel with some past programs that we put up online, Discover Nikkei project, which I'll talk a bit more about later, and of course our email newsletters and social media presence. But when March 2020 came around, which was really where in Los Angeles the shutdowns began, we really had no idea that we would have to rethink all the ways in which we reached our community. We are a national museum, but I really think that a lot of our work was a lot more local and not as much national, international. So in March 2020, as I mentioned, we had our first virtual public program. And I remember this was a program that we had planned, an event that we had planned to have in person at the museum, but it was raining in Los Angeles, which is unusual for us. And we thought between that and the fact that things were starting to close down in LA that we would have to move it virtual. So we decided to move it virtual from a physical gathering to an event using the Zoom meeting function. And this was in the early days of Zoom when, as you can see on the screen, we were still giving instructions for how to use this platform, which I think we are all much more familiar with now. And it was a writing workshop, and I was really surprised to find that even though it was a different platform, and usually we would be sitting around a table together to share stories and to write together, it still felt like a feeling of gathering together. And we were actually able to use the format of a Zoom meeting with the chat and the breakout rooms and things like that to share back what people wrote and really feel connected. And then 2 days later, the museum closed for what we thought was going to be a temporary closure of 2 weeks. And we canceled all of our gatherings until the end of April. And many of us were wondering what our jobs would be, what it would look like. And we really quickly turned to virtual possibilities and started to experiment. And for that, it looked like our JANM from Home initiative. So our early events were really a trial, as some of the other speakers have mentioned, in figuring out what would work virtually. So we used different streaming platforms to give presentations by scholars like Kristen Hayashi, our Director of Collections Access and Management, about historical moments in Los Angeles. And we had performances with artists on Zoom that highlighted mental health for Asian Americans during the current time. And we launched our JANM Digital Film Festival series, which brought new light to the short films of our Watase Media Arts Department, which is our part of our museum that shares film and stories. And looking back, I think that they looked like we were learning, and we really were learning on the go from our homes. But these were really ways in which we were able to maintain our connections. So JANM from Home, our tagline was to asking people if they could join us to be inspired, educated, and engaged. And it's about content and connection. And that's really what we stayed true to, the idea of content and connection. So as I mentioned, we had virtual events. on Zoom and YouTube Live. We had behind the scenes videos on YouTube and social media, online activities on our website created by our education department, worldwide shipping in our Janum store, and of course, discovernikkei.org, which is our project of the museum. And it was truly a cross-departmental, all hands on deck. Everyone at the museum was involved. So in these events, we still felt it was really important for us to respond to the moment and not just pretend that everything was completely normal, because of course everything was new and different. And in the United States, it was a time of increased what we're calling anti-Asian sentiment due to fear and racism in the United States. And so as an institution committed to telling Asian American stories and fighting for democracy and justice, we knew that we really needed to be a space for conversations that mattered. And so one of these early events was the one that you see on the screen, which brought many different scholars of and artists and people involved in local government into conversation to talk about anti-Asian racism, past and present, as well as our hopes for the future. So really contextualizing the moment in history, as well as providing thoughts and resources for how we could move forward as a community. And it was a really powerful conversation that had, similar to this, several hundreds of people gathered together because they were eager to talk about these issues and felt isolated and needed a moment and a possibility for connection. And of course, we also made sure that we had fun. As the last presentation mentioned, we talked about food because people love to talk about food. We highlighted this distinct Japanese American food culture through our Taste of Home series that combined academic presentations, cooking demonstrations, displays of items from our museum collections, as well as personal anecdotes. This was something that would have been much harder to do in person with so many moving elements, but the Zoom webinar format, similar to this, actually was really well suited to providing behind the scenes glimpses at our collections, as well as just presentations from people all around the country. And these programs are still available to watch on YouTube, and we found that people still come back to engage with these resources. And of course, my focus is a lot on public programs because the events is my experience, but I really have to mention the work that my coworkers and my colleagues at the museum did. Our amazing education department rewrote and developed our virtual visits to allow a global audience really to access the history and the stories that we tell at the museum. So usually before we had any sort of lockdown, we had many students from all over the Los Angeles area come to our museum and visit our exhibitions and learn about our history and culture. So as you can see here on the left, our younger audience learned the story of Isunboshi and folded origami to match the story and act along. And then on the other side of the screen, you can see for our older audiences, there's our artifacts from our core historical exhibition that highlights the World War II camp experience of Japanese American and concentration camps here in the United States. So we were able to finally reach a really new and exciting audience and stay connected and offer this resource to educators across the world. Our collections department, which is our artifacts and our department that maintains a large collection of artifacts, was able to share behind the scenes resources, which we called unboxing, in reference to those fun product unboxing videos often seen on YouTube. And they highlighted specific items in our collection. So this actually opened our doors up to the world and let us all peek behind the scenes at elements of the museum that even staff like myself, don't often get to see as they have to be maintained and protected. And our amazing social media coordinator was able to stay connected through our platforms and use this resource to spotlight our mission in new and fun ways, as you can see here, as well as, of course, our museum store sold things like the mask that you see transposed onto this image to stay connected. And I will briefly just want to touch on Discover Nikkei, which is an online project that the museum hosts, which was already a global project. It's an international community-based web project with major funding from the Nippon Foundation that launched in 2005. And it was a project of JANM that was already virtual, but what we did was implemented public programs online that expanded our international audience. So the website is in 4 languages, English, Japanese, Spanish, and Portuguese, and shares unique Nikkei stories around the world, and there's stories published daily on the website. So we leaned into the multilingual element of this and hosted events in 4 languages. So we have our ongoing Name of Voices series, which highlights our writers for the website, as well as 2 multilingual programs, What Does It Mean to Be Nikkei in 2021, and another program around Nikkei food, again, which were in multiple languages and had breakout rooms and discussions. And we're planning another event on December 3rd that will be a conversation with Nikkei chefs from around the world. So again, food, because we love to talk about food. And of course, just wrapping up, we continued to do this work even as we reopened our doors in 2021. So these are some of our first, as the previous presenters mentioned, hybrid programming that had both an in-person and a virtual audience, which has allowed us to maintain this global connection that we were never able to have before, but still able to stay connected to our people in person and really gather and feel those connections, live connections in a safe way, staying masked and distanced as needed. So I could talk about so much more, but I'm going to wrap there because I just wanted to highlight the ways in which we were able to take a really challenging time when we were locked down, when we were closed and we were unable to stay connected, to use a new platform, and to really have to learn and be challenged by new challenges that we never faced before, and take risks and learn a lot along the way. And we really hope that we can continue to tell these global stories and continue to stay connected. And I look forward to talking more with my fellow panelists about the different activities that have been done. But thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Joy Yamaguchi-san. The museum, and under COVID, all the virtual activities that you've carried out were presented. And discrimination against agents and the discussions that were held, I believe the museum activities are really spreading towards a more broader area. So now we would like to use the remaining time for Q&A. We would like to introduce some questions that we received from the viewers, the audience. And in the order of presentation, so to Daniel Ishihara-san, this is a question from Bolivia concerning REN. What are the conditions to become a member of REN?
Mucho gusto. Gracias por tu pregunta. I'll continue in English. So for being a member of REN, no matter in which country, you actually do not even need to be Nikkei. You only need to be core connected to the Nikkei culture. And when we say that REN is a network of entrepreneurs, we also don't mean that you need to have a store or you don't need to have an e-commerce or any other commercial activities. You actually need to be an entrepreneur no matter what, in what field of your business. Some people are autonomous entrepreneurs, just like dentists, lawyers. Some people are entrepreneurs for religion. They have entrepreneurship in religious activities, in cultural activities. So what you need to become a member of REN Bolivia is actually to connect to the community, since Bolivia is not yet, does not have its unit so far. We recommend you to go to renglobal.net. So in renglobal.net, you can actually choose other countries that you can actually even now express your wish and your desire to become a member of REN Bolivia, and we'll connect back to you, and you'll be very welcome to our network. Gracias por tu pregunta más una vez.
Thank you very much. And in relation to that, from Panama, there is another question. This is a country that doesn't have REN. So countries without REN and Japanese companies in those countries, how can they connect with REN? And can they connect with REN?
Mo Ichido, muchas gracias por tu pregunta. In the same way, you can also get connected to renglobal.net and leave us a message, leave us an email. We want to connect with you, because if you are willing to engage in this networking project, perhaps you are the one to start the REN Panama project, and we'll be happy to assist you with everything we have to offer you. Just like a franchisor with their franchise, we'll be able to tell you the meaning, how to organize your first group, how to set up your website, and we actually provide all the tools you need for that. So please just connect with us, renglobal.net.
Thank you very much. All communication is possible over the internet. And we have a question for Sergio TOKUMORI from someone in Mexico. The ILU and Peru and the Nikkei associations, there seem to be many organizations. How do you maintain membership and the membership dues? How much are they? And what percent of the membership dues are used for activities and events? And through such events, the Nikkei associations and organizations, do the events generate revenue? That is my that is the question. We receive membership dues. After World War II, someone had the great idea to gather for the next generations of Nikkei. And those people bought land for that purpose, so that the Nikkei communities can gather again. They had been living in great hardship, and after several years, the people who owned those shares, they thought all the descendants of Japanese should be able to participate for a very low fee in social and sports, social and cultural activities. And this idea was accepted by everyone, including the poor people, young people and adults, children. They began to take part in many sports. Membership dues is 38 in US dollars, $38 per month. This is very low. some organizations, clubs charge $300 or $400, but this was a price that all people could pay easily, because our objective was to maintain the community and to be able to play tennis in this community, or bowling, or pétanque, or whatever. We wanted to bring together all sports fans and participants of social activities to be able to gather at that club. So we always constantly bear that responsibility, which is to protect the identities that our ancestors, Nikkei ancestors, left us. And the people outside of the Nikkei community, for those people also, we charge a low membership fee. Many people want to participate, but they need to at least fill the criteria of having the same identity as us. And the financial aspect, due to the membership dues, we are able to maintain a lot of our facilities, and we have various sports events every 2 or 3 years. In Argentina, the next sports event is scheduled. We are engaged in various activities, and they need to be self-financing. And of course, participants need to pay travel expenses to participate in the events. Our membership dues cannot cover that. However, regarding the economic aspects, we can do fundraising in many ways. And in other activities, organizations such as the Japan-Peru Association, we collaborate with such organizations. And that renders benefits. And we have access to revenue generated from other activities as well. Thank you very much, Sergio.
So there are a lot of questions coming in. Now, Hosokawa-san. So it seems that people are concerned about money, fees. So to Hosokawa-san, another person from Mexico is asking. So the Nikkei organization's management, how is that done? Is it based on membership fees, or is it based on funds raised through these yakisoba events and other events? Well, yes, the membership fees are not enough for the management of the organization. That's why we have these yakisoba events or the udon events. We sometimes have sukiyaki event. Selling food, Japanese food for fundraising, I think is the way that we try to raise funds. So it does seem that yakisoba is quite popular and it's very useful. So next to Joy Yamaguchi-san. This is a question from a person here in Japan. And the American-Japanese Museum went online, and there were access made from around the world. So as for the museum, what is the message that you want to send out to the people who visit the museum from around the world? That's the question.
Yes, thank you for your question. I think that we our work always is focused around our mission, which is to share the Japanese American experience. And we focus on that experience from the late 1800s immigration to the present day. And that includes early history of immigration to the World War II incarceration experience and the war, to the civil rights struggles to the present day. And we really think that highlighting that history allows people of any background from any location to understand more about their own history and culture, and to be able to connect person to person through their stories. So I think that is something that is so important to us to do. We want to share, of course, Japanese American history and culture, but we want to be a place of connection, to be a place to highlight and to highlight the importance of creating connections and building bridges across communities, and being a place of discussion and celebration too. So I think that is something that we hope to do both locally and globally. And projects like our Discover Nikkei project, which tell the stories of people all around the world, are really indicative and a really great example of the work that we're trying to do globally. So I hope that people will check out both our website as well as the Discover Nikkei website, which can be read, as mentioned, in all four different, in all four languages that are represented today as well.
Thank you very much. We have a proposal or a question from the Philippines to Joy Yamaguchi. In the Philippines, there is a Philippine-Japan Historical Museum, and next year is the 120th anniversary of Japanese immigration to the Philippines, and various events are planned. And the Japanese American National Museum and the Philippines Japanese Museum, can the two museums collaborate on something interesting to do with Japanese immigrants? What would you have to say to that?
Yes, I think that sounds like a really exciting opportunity. I know that there's someone in the audience today who is part of the museum. I'm sorry, you can hear my dog in the background, which, as we all know, is one of the challenges of doing these kinds of presentations online. But he wanted to join in the conversation. I will say, yes, I would love to collaborate globally. That's something that's really exciting and important to us. So I can, if that's okay with the organizers, put my information in the chat to be in conversations. But I know that we have, as I mentioned, someone who's already in the audience is someone from the Philippines. I think Ines is here, who is part of our Discover Nikkei and has been part of our programs before. So I would love to discuss collaborations with many different folks around the world.
Thank you very much. This panel discussion is serving to expand global networks, and to witness this is very impressive. And we are starting to run out of time, but we would like to solicit questions from the trainees who have joined us today. We'll bring you the microphone.
Hajimemashite. Watashi wa Albertano Octavio desu. Octavio Burazeru-jin desu. And I have a question for Mrs. Yamaguchi-san, if that's okay. So, as you mentioned before, there was you started an anti-Asian racist past and present program in America. As far as I know, we don't have such programs in Brazil, even though we have this kind of problems. just like you do in America. So this is something that maybe we could talk about. I would love to cooperate with you on this subject. So maybe I can bring something, I can start with your help, something like that in my country. So since I'm interested on that subject, I would like to ask for some results. So it started in 2020 and now we have 2 years gone by. How's the situation? Has this improved somehow? What is your view on the subject?
Yes, thank you for your question and your comment. It's always interesting for myself to learn more about global struggles and global issues. So thank you for sharing that this is also something that happens in Brazil. Yes, I think that that's also an important conversation for us to have to understand how how these issues are connected and are both very hyper local as well as broad and international. So would love to, again, I put my email in the chat and would love to stay in touch with folks. And as to the larger issue, it is still an ongoing conversation. It's still something that is definitely at the forefront of our minds. We actually just finished a year-long artist residency program with 2 artists, a visual artist, Audrey Chan, and a rapper, performer, Jason Chu, who developed a project called Asian American Vocabulary, An American Vocabulary, Words to Action, which highlights different Asian and Asian American icons and moments throughout history that are often not told. And it was as a part to challenge what the issues that are happening now and to really show how Asian Americans fit into a American narrative more broadly. And the fellowship, though, started because we wanted to give Asian American artists a platform. So I would say that it's still an issue in the US. There is still violence and hate crimes against Asian American folks. But there are many more conversations happening. We saw many organizations like JANM, but also other partnerships that we have made with other community organizations supporting both what we were talking about and having their own conversations in many different ethnic communities, and also not only Asian Americans, across different people of color here in the US, as well as just general folks who care about the issue. So I would say it's still something, but I feel a lot of hope around the amount of conversations that are happening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, there are many other questions flowing in, but unfortunately, we've run out of time. Therefore, we would like to end the discussion part here. But we will be sending along or forwarding the questions to the panelists so that we might be able to get some answers to those questions. And lastly, but not least, just one word. Before the convention, we carried out a questionnaire survey to the Nikkei organizations around the world concerning what were the impacts of COVID-19 on your activities and what are you doing for that. And 14 organizations responded, so thank you very much for that. And I would like to report on some of the answers we got back. Many organizations took measures to protect the elderly and also distributed bento lunchboxes. So for the members, organizations tried to protect the members, but not just that, but also provided food, water, and masks to those people who are disadvantaged in society. So they helped the community. For example, the organization in New York, they had a Japanese food restaurant that collaborated with them to help the medical workers at the forefront of the fight against COVID-19, and also the railway workers, as well as fire department people, the cleaning staff. The the essential workers. So bento lunchboxes were distributed to these essential workers to express not just gratitude, but also this was a way to appeal Japanese food, and there were many more people who took part in volunteer activities, and this led to spreading the network of these activities. So the Nihon Jinkai, or the Nikkei organizations, tend to focus on mutual help among the members or exchanges among members, but under the pandemic, I think the activity spread wider to help the community that the Nikkei people live in. And it seems that some organizations were able to connect with other non-Nikkei organizations. So it's not just closed within the Nikkei community or Nikkei organizations. Now the activities are spreading out into the community, into the non-Nikkei community as well. So the activities are expanding. And through such activities, the Nikkei community is building up a new presence. And the theme for this convention is the sustainable development of the Nikkei communities and Japan. So this is quite a grand theme. Sustainable development. It may be rather vague, but of course the UN came up with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And that was the sustainable development is used in there by the UN, and also many Japanese schools have activities related to the SDGs. And so SDGs is now familiar among many Japanese people. So I am wondering how you are also embracing sustainable development. But in the background, we are saying that business as usual is not sustainable, that we will not see a sustainable future. I believe that is what is in the background. So we need to do something different from yesterday. I think there is this sense of crisis behind these words. And for a sustainable development of the Nikkei community, I believe we need to think about that thoroughly. And what is it that the Nikkei community should do in order to be sustainable? I believe that we are now facing that question. And also, as we heard in the panel discussion, all the panelists probably touched upon that point, saying that under COVID, you couldn't carry on as usual. You had to turn to virtual methods and had to take up new things. And you had to open up your activities for a broader audience. And it seems that your activities are being upgraded. And the example of Ren and also the example of the museum, we have heard about new connections being made here through this symposium. And I'm hoping that these activities will lead to a sustainable development of the Nikkei community and Japan. So I do hope that you can continue the good work. And I'm very sorry that I have overran our time, but with this, we'd like to end panel discussion 1. Thank you very much, and muchas gracias.
This concludes the first panel discussion. Mr. Nakai and the panelists, thank you very much.
And I believe you may know, but the JICA Japanese Overseas Migration Museum was established in 2002, and we are celebrating our 20th anniversary. And after the renovation in the latter half of last fiscal year, we reopened anew this April, and we would now like to introduce the new museum. First, we'd like to have some words from JICA President, Mr. Akihiko Tanaka. Congratulations on the successful holding of the 62nd Convention of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad, and I'm very happy to have this opportunity to speak to you. And I would like to thank the Association of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad for giving me this opportunity. First of all, I would like to express my deep condolences to the late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. In 2014, July, Mr. Abe visited 5 Latin American countries and talked about the 3 juntos. And he continued to visit the Latin American countries and met with many Nikkei people and Nikkei organizations, and he really cherished those moments. And with his thoughts for the Nikkei community, as for JICA, we will also continue to try to promote the development of Nikkei community and Nikkei abroad. Now, I became president of JICA this April, but from 2012 to 2015, I was also president of JICA. Back then, I was able to visit Brazil, Peru, Cuba, and other Latin American countries. In Brazil, the Nikkei people lived in the Cerrado area, barren land, and I was able to speak to farmers there. And in Peru, the then President Abel Fukumoto of the Peruvian Japanese Association, I was able to meet with him and the people of the association. And I was able to understand the hardship of the Nikkei people faced, but still the Nikkei and Sansei people have gained the trust of the local community, and you have all been contributing to developing your societies. Now, as for our museum, as a project to link together Latin America and the Nikkei society abroad, we opened here in 2002. We wanted to introduce the immigration history as well as the contributions made by the immigrants abroad, and also the society they've created in their receiving countries. And since the opening in 2002, over the 20 years, about 600,000 people visited the museum. Some people learned about the Nikkei history for the first time after coming to the museum, and some people actually, Nikkei Yonsei said that they were able to regain their identity as a Nikkei by visiting here. We are the sole museum taking up immigration, and we are trying to collect testaments from the Issei immigrants as well as gather Japanese newspapers which were published abroad so that we can support research being done on the Nikkei immigration. Now, over the 20 years, we have seen that generational changes are ongoing in the Nikkei society. And now some Nikkei people have gained very important positions in their country of residence. Over the 20 years, things have changed in Japan as well. We are facing an aging society and a decline in population. And we believe that we will be receiving more of foreign nationals, and we will have to prepare to open up for a multicultural coexistence. Now, the Nikkei people abroad have actually been doing that, and I believe we can learn a lot from the Nikkei people living abroad. Last year, we renewed our museum, and we have added more exhibition about the immigration history, and we will continue to have exhibitions so that Nikkei people can discover their roots, and also non-Nikkei people can learn about the immigration history of Japan. I do hope that you can visit the newly opened museum and learn about the past history of immigration in Japan. And the network that we have created with the Nikkei Society abroad, we will try to strengthen that so that we can capture the changing Nikkei society abroad. We will also utilize online tools so that people around the world can learn about the immigration history, and we hope that we can provide a forum to think about the multicultural coexistence society. I do hope that when you come to visit Japan and visit Yokohama, you can visit our newly opened museum. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, President Tanaka. And now here's a video introducing the Overseas Migration Museum. Welcome. I'm Taku Nakane, the director of the JICA Yokohama Museum for Japanese Migration Overseas. Carry on the work of one of its predecessor organizations, the Japan Immigration Service, JICA has conducted various programs to serve Japanese migrants overseas in order to assist them in settling and building stable livelihoods in their host countries. In 2002, we established the Museum for Japanese Overseas Migration in Yokohama, which together with Kobe was one of the departure ports for Japanese migrants heading overseas. The museum is aimed at widely disseminating knowledge and awareness about the history of Japanese overseas migration, which can be said to be one of the starting points of modern Japanese history, and about the current situation of the Nikkei people, the descendants of the migrants. At this museum, we showcase the more than 150-year history of the Japanese migration to North America, including Hawaii and Latin America and other countries. And it introduces the Nikkei communities around the world, said to be more than 3.8 million in number, and the achievements and contributions of the Nikkei in Brazil and other host countries, and the ties between Nikkei and Japan. To commemorate its 20th anniversary, the Museum of Japanese Overseas Migration renewed parts of its exhibition space. In the renewal work, we aimed for an exhibit that would enable visitors to better understand the past and present of Nikkei communities and added new components. In this theater, called the Pioneer Theater, we can learn about the history of the development of the Iguazu Japanese colony in Paraguay, where many Japanese migrated to, all the way to the present day, on a 3-panel screen. Because it is a museum in Yokohama, we try to have a substantial exhibit of things related to Yokohama. This exhibit is about the relief supplies sent from North America and Latin America to Japan following its defeat in World War II through LARA, Licensed Agencies for Relief in Asia. The relief supplies arrived at the port of Yokohama and were sent all over Japan. We have tried to be creative in order to be a museum that many people will find enjoyable. We introduce braille blocks, additional explanations for exhibits, and audio guides. Visitors can take photos that look like they have just chopped down a tree. It is designed so that visitors can feel how large the tree is. We have more items that can be touched, enjoyed by not only seeing but also touching. In our permanent exhibit, we show valuable interview footage that can only be seen at this museum. Visitors can compare the interviews of past migrants to interviews of current Nikkei. Some of the footage give us insight and ideas on how to create multicultural, symbiotic societies going forward. Also popular is the terminal, where you can run searches of Japanese people who migrated to Peru and Brazil. That search function is also accessible from the website of the museum. In the latter part of the exhibit, we have many things that will help us think of how we can achieve a society where multiple cultures coexist. We have an exhibit on Yokohama, which is a progressive community which has spearheaded the efforts to create a multicultural, symbiotic society. If you are ever in Yokohama, please visit the Museum for Japanese Overseas Migration. And Director Nakane is at the museum, which has recently been revamped. We would now like to speak to Mr. Nakane, Director Nakane, are you ready?
Thank you very much. I'm Nakane, and I hope you have enjoyed the video introducing the newly reopened museum. And I'd like to thank Kyodai Remittance for their cooperation in creating this video with us. Now, it's been 20 years since the museum was opened. The Nikkei people, the Nikkei organizations have cooperated with us and have supported us, and that's why we have come so far. As a JICA staff, I went to Mexico, Paraguay, and Honduras, and I was able to speak to many Nikkei Issei. And through these exchanges, I was able to understand the hardships that the immigrants have faced, and also I understood that the Nikkei, Nisei, and Sansei people have gained trust and respect from the local community. And I believe that was possible because of all the hardships that you have overcome. Now, with the renewal of the museum, we have changed our exhibition to make the changes in the Nikkei society abroad visible. We wanted to make sure that the history of migration is more easily understood, and also we wanted to provide some hints for multicultural societies. And this, we weren't able to show you the Alianza migration and pioneering activities. I wanted to show the size of the tree that has been cut down, but we have used this circle to show how large the tree was. And we also have spaces where you can take 3D photos, and we hope that you can enjoy these dynamic exhibits.
Our museum has been refurbished, and while continuing the expansion of our collection, preservation work, and research, and developing more online tools, we will strive to encourage more people to avail themselves to the offerings of this museum. In 2019, we started to invite people to send in their academic papers, essays, and critiques on subjects related to overseas migration. This is the third year of our contest. The objective of this contest is to seek writings on Japanese immigration to Latin America, and by announcing the works that excel, to heighten understanding and interest in the history of Japanese migration overseas. We also aim to increase the number of scholars who take up the study of immigration and raise an awareness towards current challenges such as multicultural symbiosis in society. The other day, the selection panel screened the works that were sent in for the third contest. I will announce the results here today. This is the academic papers category. The grand prize went to Tanaka Kazuyuki of Kindai University Technical College. The paper titled "The Gento Slides Used to Encourage Japanese Immigrants in Brazil," and Noda Ryoji. Next slide, please. And the essay and critique category, the grand prize went to Tanaka Christina of the director of the Japan Chamber of Commerce in Paraguay, and the work titled "Writing Poetry in the Vast Land of Red Soil, the Kajin Poets Connecting Paraguay and Japan." And next, there were 2 awards for excellence given in essay and critique. The reason for success of Korea's immigration policy to Brazil, coexistence with Japan's immigrant community, and the presence of the Japanese immigrants under Japanese colonial rule, by Tei Hana of the Fukuoka Prefecture Local Government Research Center. And the other one was Paste Nikkei by Uchiyama Yuki of the Hamamatsu International Exchange Association. And for the essay and critique, the honorable mention, the first honorable mention went to Ito Jorge of the School of Life Science and Technology of Peru, titled Jesus Maria, a Town That Took in Japanese Immigrants. And the other honorable mention was An Invitation to Curiosity, Reflections on My Field Studies in Lima by Mariko Otsuka of the Himeji City Study Supporter. The award recipients will receive a certificate, and the grand prize and the award of excellence winners will receive a cash prize. Congratulations to the recipients. The award-winning works will be put up on our museum website, and we are also considering asking the award recipients to speak at the lecture event. All the works, even if they did not win an award, were very impressive. In December, we plan to invite entries for the 4th Academic Paper Essays and Critiques Contest. We look forward to many entries from within and outside Japan. We are still feeling the effects of the coronavirus pandemic, but gradually the world, including Japan, is starting to open up its borders to international travel. We hope the situation continues to improve, and we look forward to seeing you in person again. Please visit the revamped Museum for Japanese Overseas Migration when you are in Japan or in Yokohama. Thank you, Mr. Nakane, for introducing the upgraded museum and announcing the results of the 3rd JICA contest regarding academic papers, essays, and critiques on overseas immigration. And we will now begin the second part of the panel discussion. We repeat, today the key language of the proceedings will be in Japanese, but simultaneous interpretation is available in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Please click the interpreter button at the menu at the bottom of your screen and select your preferred language. And once again, if you have any questions, please use the question form in the chat column and send in your questions through the Google form. And when you ask your question, please indicate to whom your question is addressed to. And comments, apart from the questions, can be directly written into the chat box. And if you are sending a message to everyone, please address the message to all before you send it. And we hope you use the chat column as a form of interaction among yourselves. We look forward to your warm messages.
Now, thank you very much for waiting. In the second part, the theme will be textbook descriptions of Nikkei people and current status of learning activities and challenges. We have some experts and also people involved in this field. And the moderator is Managing Director of our association and also professor of Musashi University. We have Professor Angelo Ishii. So the floor is yours now. Yes, thank you very much. Good day or good evening. I am Angelo Ishii. I am a Brazilian Japanese living here in Japan, and my daughter was born here in Japan, and now she is in elementary school. So textbooks and learning are keywords today, and I am really interested in these themes. And I have been involved in several expert panels and committees taking up the theme of multicultural society. And I have been talking about the importance of raising awareness concerning immigration and also Nikkei. Of course, it's very difficult to change the mindsets of adults. I believe we need to start early from the schools and school education. So the purpose of today's panel discussion is, in order for the Japanese society to understand about the Nikkei society and Nikkei people, I believe we need to have descriptions in Japanese textbooks about immigration, the Nikkei people, and Nikkei society. And in 2021, the Association of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad have carried out a survey about description in elementary, junior, and senior high school textbooks about the Nikkei people. And then at the end of 2021, at the board and Board of Governors and Board of Trustees meeting, a report was made about the survey, and that's when there was a proposal to take up this theme at a panel discussion in this year's convention. So that's why we have decided to have this panel discussion. Now, in this panel discussion, we will first hear a report about the result of the textbook survey, and we will also take up the current status of learning opportunities about Nikkei people and Nikkei society, as well as how it is actually being taught. And we will also be looking forward to your opinion and comments as well as questions. Now, we have 4 panelists. I believe you will be able to see their profiles on the convention program on our webpage, but I would like to briefly introduce them. The first presenter will be right next to me is Ms. Harumi Hijikata. She is the Secretary General of our association, and she was also a member of the survey team of the textbooks. And she will be giving us a report about what she found through the survey. And also she will talk about future activities. The second presenter is Mr. Shiyu Miyazawa. He is a teacher at a junior high school. He was a former journalist at Kobe Shimbun, and he also was a former JICA volunteer. He will talk about what is happening in the actual education scene in teaching about immigration and Nikkei. And he will also talk about the importance of learning such things and what he hopes to see in future textbooks. The third presenter is Tadaaki Ito. He's a staff of the association, and also he was a journalist for the Peru Shimpo newspaper. And he was also editor, and he received a scholarship from the from the Nippon Foundation. He will talk about the Nikkei perspective on teaching and learning about Nikkei people and Nikkei society here in Japan. And lastly is Morimo, or Takeo Morimo. He is a professor emeritus at Chuo University, and he is a curator at the museum here at JICA. He will talk about the education program available here at the JICA Museum, and he will introduce to us the theory as well as actual implementation of learning and teaching about immigration and Nikkei. Now, I'm hoping that we can take up the following points in our discussion or during our QA time. The first point is, who should we or where should we go to when we want to enrich the descriptions about Nikkei in our textbooks? Another point is, it's not just textbook descriptions, but also if we want to promote information sharing and understanding about Nikkei in the education scene, who is it or where is it that we should go to appeal? And lastly, and this is related to my own research, but not just the Nikkei people who immigrated abroad, but the Nikkei people who came back to Japan. I believe it is not really described fully in the textbooks. So for the Nikkei people living here in Japan, textbooks descriptions and also having more opportunities to learn about that, I would like to hear your opinion and your comments about how to do that. So then right away, I would like to ask Hijikata-san for her report. Thank you very much. I am Hijikata from the Association of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad. I would like to talk about the survey of textbook descriptions of Nikkei, which was carried out in 2021. First, a little bit about the purpose and how this came about. At the association, once a year, we have this convention. And every time when we hold the convention, people tell us that maybe Japanese people don't know about Nikkei people. This should be taught at Japanese schools. And also, as you've seen in the video, tributary video for Prime Minister Abe, in 2017, the panel of experts on collaborating with Nikkei in Central and South America reported that in order to have people become interested in Nikkei society, it may be good to take this up in school textbooks. That was pointed out. So what is being written in the textbooks being used at school currently? So first we tried to look at how much description we can find in the textbooks. So we went to publishers, and based on the response we got from publishers, we bought several textbooks. We were a 4-member team, and we created a database concerning the textbook descriptions, and we also scanned the textbooks, and based on that, we've compiled a final report. So we had 5 elementary school textbooks, 15 junior high school textbooks, and 33 senior high school textbooks, so altogether 53. And we have looked at textbooks used in fiscal year 2021. So this is the database that we've created. The publisher, which school it is used in, and which page, or is it from the main text, or is it a photograph, or is it just a column description? We also looked at which country was taken up, or which city was taken up. Is it talking about immigration of Japanese abroad, or is it about the Nikkei people here in Japan? We also pick up some characteristic words. So let's take a look at the description in textbooks. I'm not going to go into detail. I will just highlight some points. In social studies of elementary school, children will learn about overseas countries in the 6th year. So United States and China is taken up, and other countries, depending on which publisher made the textbook. And so, for example, in Brazil, the Brazil nation, the industry and people's lives, and also Japanese people's immigration was taken up. And also for the United States, there were descriptions about the Nikkei people and Little Tokyo. For junior high school, you will learn geography, history, and civic studies. There weren't any major differences between different publishers. In geography of South American states, all textbooks said that many immigrants went from Japan in the 20th century. B, the United States accepted many immigrants, and also in Australia, the White Australia policy was abolished. Those were the descriptions found, but only one textbook talked about Japan specifically. And C, a textbook talked about many Brazilians working in Oizumi town of Gunma Prefecture, and also there was another textbook talking about Hamamatsu City in Shizuoka Prefecture. This is for junior high school history. For the United States, they talked about after the Civil War, industry developed, and many immigrants came from Asia. Many textbooks talked about the 1880s Industrial Revolution, creating a disparity in wealth, and many people had to work very hard. There were many people who moved to Hawaii, and many people also immigrated to Brazil. During World War II, Japanese Americans were sent to internment camps, and there were compensations being made and apologies being presented. That was written in one textbook. In civic studies of junior high school, because of globalization, there are many foreign nationals living here in Japan and many Japanese people living abroad. It mentioned China, South Korea, Vietnam, Philippines, and Brazil being the main sending countries for people living here in Japan. B, you learn about multiple cultures and different cultures. And there was a description about, in recent years, Japan, there are many people coming from Brazil, Vietnam, and Philippines. And also C, it talks about creating a society with no discrimination being very important. High school textbooks. You have geography, Japanese history, and world history. You have A and B. A focuses on a more narrow history, and it is used in industrial high schools and commercial high schools. But if you are to advance to university, you need to have world history B. And B will cover everything from modern history all the way from the ancient days. And I would like to show, or rather, where you had a lot of the descriptions, it's written in red, and otherwise it's blue. For Latin America, from 19th century end to 20th century, it talks about many immigrants coming from Japan. Anglo-America, about 60% of the textbooks talked about the indigenous people, immigrants from Europe, and also slaves from Africa, and that United States is a immigration country, that it has many ethnic groups and multiple cultures. But there were descriptions of Asian immigrants, but only a few talked about immigrants from Japan, and also for Oceania as well. And D, about 60% of the textbooks talked about Nikkei people, and also the 1990 immigration law change led to allowing sanseis to work here in Japan. But there were also descriptions about the Nikkei people being handled differently according to the law. And high school Japanese history. 60% talked about immigration to Hawaii during the Meiji era, but 90% talked about the schools banning Japanese children from attending in San Francisco in 1906, and also about the Japanese exclusion movement. B, 60% of textbooks talked about Japan going into southern Indochina, which was French territory, and also in 1941 the United States froze many Japanese assets, and 40% of the textbooks talked about the internment of Nikkei people in the United States, and also in 1988 about the apology and compensation was made, but only 30% talked about this in the high school Japanese history textbook. World history textbook, 70% talked about European immigrants supporting the development of industry in the United States in the latter half of the 19th century, and also immigrants came from China and Japan. And for Latin America, from the late 19th century, European and Asian immigrants actually helped the economic development. B, only about 50% took up the exclusion movement in the United States of Nikkei people. And also concerning the internment, about 20% of the textbook talked about this, and only 10% talked about the compensation as well as apology. And modern day history. We now have many Nikkei Brazilians and Peruvians here in Japan, and also there was a description about President Fujimori in Peru, who is a Nikkei Nisei. Finally, as schools, elementary schools will teach about countries with very strong ties with Japan. Therefore, Brazil is taken up in many of the textbooks. In junior and senior high school, many textbooks looked at the increase of Japanese and other Asian immigrants into the South and North America, and also but there were not many textbooks that talked about the internment of Nikkei people during the war and also the apology after that. So there aren't much descriptions. However, there is a limit of what you can teach through textbooks, and therefore it's much important to provide a wider opportunity to learn about these things and teach about these things. And we would like to think about what the association can do to help the experts as well as the school teachers for this education. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hijikata, and thank you for the hard work you put into your research and survey. And other researchers will be able to use the various and valuable outcomes of your research. And I think your research will have widespread impact. And next, Mr. Miyazawa. I'm Miyazawa Shu. I'm currently a teacher at a public junior high school in Kyoto Prefecture, but I was a reporter for the Kobe Shimbun newspaper for 23 years. During that time, for 2 years, from 1999, I was sent to the Brasilia Japanese Language Studies Association as a JICA youth volunteer for Nikkei communities. I was in the job category of editing, planning, and public relations. So I helped with the compilation of the 10-year history of the association, the launch of the association's bulletin, and organizing the Pan-American Japanese Language Teachers Training Program. At the junior high school, I teach social studies. In the junior high school history and geography textbook, there is mention made of the history and the present situation of the Japanese who migrated to Brazil. Mr. Hijikata has just spoken about that. I don't see how we can avoid teaching about the immigrant history of the hundreds of thousands of people who crossed the ocean to other countries, but the history book used at the junior high school where I teach only has several lines in it about Japanese immigrants, and there is no mention of the immigrants who went after World War II. In the geography textbook, there is an article titled Japanese Who Went to Brazil, but textbooks include many such articles separate from the main text, and it is doubtful whether all teachers would read through them properly with the students. It has also a great deal to do with the level of interest the teacher has in the subject. In that sense, it is important to make teachers understand the importance of teaching students about the Nikkei communities and the history of immigration, but there is no clear protocol yet on exactly what needs to be taught. The official course of study, the guideline for what is taught at school, does not specifically include the subject of immigrants, so teachers are not obligated to teach it. Things being such, I think it is very important that school textbooks include material on immigration, even if the passages are short. If they are mentioned in the textbooks, that makes it easier to teach students about immigrants and Nikkei communities during class. That is where things stand. For me personally, to deepen students' understanding on multicultural symbiosis or coexistence, I take up the Nikkei community and Brazilian immigrants in my geography class. All textbooks explain in some detail multicultural coexistence, so I tie into that the Brazilian Nikkei community. I show students an actual sample of a Japanese language newspaper from Brazil and ask them where they think it was published. Most students don't know the answer. When I tell them Brazil, they start to wonder why. That leads them to be curious about the existence of a community in Brazil where there is a need for a Japanese language newspaper. Then I show them 4 pages of the Japanese language newspaper so they can see some of the content of the paper. 1, I take up the page about news about Japan, including baseball school scores and sumo results. And second, news about Nikkeis in Brazil. And thirdly, the cultural column or literary column, which prints haiku, senryu, and tanka by readers. And fourthly, news stories from Brazil translated into Japanese. These are the 4 pages I show the students. I organize the students into small groups to hold discussions on which pages of the newspaper are the most popular. The children have various opinions, and I explain the answer to them. In the olden days, people liked to read 1, domestic news from Japan. But these days, people have access to NHK, and they can also read the news on the internet. The most popular category of articles until now used to be 2, news about the Nikkei community in Brazil. But since the coronavirus pandemic started, more attention was focused on Brazilian domestic news related to COVID, which would be 4. For the Issei who are not proficient in Portuguese, the availability of information can be a life or death matter. So more people started to pay attention to 4. But what I want them to realize through the discussions is that all of the pages are there because readers need them. All of the pages are relevant to people who immigrated to Brazil. This is how I want them to get an insight into what the Nikkei community is like. In Brazil, Japanese language schools operated by Nikkei and attended primarily by Nikkei children may be decreasing in number, but there are still many. With the Sansei and Yonsei being the main current generations, there is a growing number of people who do not understand Japanese, and Japanese language newspapers have fewer readers. Nevertheless, there is still a community in Brazil that is bound together by the Japanese language. The Issei attached great importance to educating their children. They sent them to universities such as the University of São Paulo. There are quite a lot of Nikkei who become doctors or lawyers. In other words, Brazilian society has been accepting of such Nikkei. Likewise, there are communities of people in Brazil who speak Italian, German, Ukrainian, and other languages. That is multicultural symbiosis. Then how about Japanese society? I asked the children that question. How are the Nikkei, Dekasegi, migrant workers, and immigrants being received in Japan? How are they being treated? How has Japan treated the communities that speak Korean or Chinese, as well as their schools? Fukazawa Masayuki, the chief editor of Brazil Nippo, has said that multicultural coexistence in Japan can only be realized in Japan if immigrants have the chance to receive higher education, as that is what we learned from the history of Japanese immigrants to Brazil, and I think he is absolutely right. I want Japanese junior high school students to realize that there are such ways to look at the current situation. Also important is how to frame immigrants in the context of Japan's history. When I was a newspaper reporter, I wrote many articles about Japanese immigrants to Brazil. In particular, in 2008, the 100th anniversary of Japanese migration to Brazil, I was given many opportunities to write articles. And one of them was the newspaper column, The Heroes and Heroines of Immigrant History. There, I wrote about the story of a woman that I met while in Brazil. The woman who had been brought to Brazil by her parents told me quite simply, "We are people abandoned by our country." She said she had been thrown into a farm with no electricity and running water and had felt despair. She said that her only consolation was the belief that she was being useful to Japan. After the war, the population boomed and arable land was in short supply. The government encouraged migration in order to resolve the food shortage that it feared. The woman said, "Because we left Japan and we went overseas, Japan's economic growth was possible. To that, I could say nothing." In Brasilia, there were already people who had moved there after World War II from the Amazon or Bolivia or Dominica. The Japanese immigrants arrived to dire conditions. They did not even have water and no markets to sell any crops, even if they could grow any. They couldn't speak the language either, and it was very difficult to emerge from their conditions. Some ended up committed suicide. What the nation did to its people and the terrible suffering that the Issei went through, that is all very significant. In Brasilia, for example, the Nikkei people helped to keep the capital, with its long dry period, supplied with food. That kind of history cannot and should not be told by only 2 lines in a school textbook. In my column, I wrote that I wanted the 100th anniversary of the Japanese immigration to be a year that would highlight the experiences of the immigrants themselves, the heroes and heroines of the immigration story. I still feel the same way today as a teacher. I listened to the stories of the post-war immigrants absolutely captivated and with bated breath. But many of them said that they had not told their stories to their own grandchildren. They said it's because they don't want to talk to them about poverty and grueling hardships. But I don't think their grandchildren would feel repulsed. On the contrary, I think they would feel very proud. In schools, in prefectures such as Aichi, Shizuoka, and Gunma, where there are many students whose roots are in Central and South America, I think it is important that they learn about the history of Japanese immigrants. Children of Sansei and Yonsei know surprisingly little about the lives that their grandparents and great-grandparents led. I would like them to be proud of their roots. The Japanese students who surround these children know even less. Why are there Nikkei people in Central and South America? They need to have a shared understanding of the origins of their classmates. Last year, with the help of Fukazawa-san, I gave a class in which children were given the chance to ask the chief editor of a Japanese language newspaper questions about the Nikkei community. Fukazawa-san was actually a batchmate of mine from my JICA youth volunteer days. I had wanted students to interview Nikkei people themselves, but due to the time difference and the technical challenges of setting up communication between the interviewee and in 5 classes, I Instead, I collected the questions from the students and conducted a Zoom interview myself and showed the students a recording of the interviews. Some students found it interesting, but I think that direct communication would have more of an impact. I'm still in the process of finding out the best way to do this. What do we learn from Nikkei communities and the history of immigrants, and what for? I think the history of immigration, which now exceeds 100 years, and the Nikkei communities, past and present, can offer us a lot of insight and ideas when we think about the issue of globalization of Japanese society and multicultural coexistence in Japan.
So thank you very much. I believe you are carrying out a very unique practice, and because you are in the educational field, it does encourage us. So next, Ito-san, please. Thank you very much for the introduction. And now I'd like to share my screen. So the meaning and practice of immigration education from my own experience as in the Nikkei society. I work at the Association of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad. I'm a Nikkei Peruvian Yonsei. My name is Tadaaki Ito. So I will be talking about the following. First, about the importance of immigration studies from a Nikkei perspective, and how the history of immigration was picked up in the Nikkei society. So first, about the importance of immigration study. So from a Nikkei perspective, it is very important to take up immigration history, because we believe that this is very important to have respect to our ancestors, and also to maintain our Nikkei identity, and also to hand down the Nikkei culture. I have been covering the Nikkei society in Peru and Nikkei schools as a journalist for over 20 years, and I believe I understand some of the key elements in learning about the immigration history. I will take up 3 points. First of all is the centennial commemoration of Peruvians in Japanese Peruvians. I attended the La Unión school, a Nikkei school in Pueblo Libre of Lima, to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Japanese immigration. The Peruvian Japanese Association created a comic book entitled La Gran Aventura. I was 9 years old, and I got this book, and I learned about the Sakura Maru, which brought the first immigrants to Peru. And this became a starting point for me to become interested in Peruvian Nikkei. And this was made by the committee for the centennial. It's written in Spanish. And many Nikkei associations would publish books about Nikkei history and about the establishment of the organizations on anniversaries. I have actually lived through the 100th anniversary and the 120th anniversary. And the APJ also published a book about the history on these occasions, and I believe that these books should be updated so that the future generations of Nikkei people can learn about their history. The second example is about the Soy Nikkei campaign after the Peruvian census. In 2017, October, a census survey was carried out in Peru. For the first time, everybody above 12 years old were asked the question, what national consciousness do they have? But among the options, which were mestizo, African Peruvian, Inca Peruvian, Aymara tribe, there was no option for Nikkei. And therefore, 4 Nikkei youth got together and through social media sent out a message saying that we should say we are Nikkei to that question. And that was the Soy Nikkei Peru campaign. I believe that this is a welcome movement because it came out of the Nikkei society itself. And on Facebook, it gathered about 6,200 likes. And the youth that came up with the idea were picked up in the local media. And also, there were many interviews about Nikkei people who are active in various fields. And in the end, 22,000 people said that they were Nikkei in answering the census. That's just 0.09% of the total people who answered the census. But it seemed that through this campaign, many Nikkei people started to think about their Nikkei identity and also became interested in learning about the immigration history. So from about 20 years ago, we have been saying that there's about 100,000 Nikkei in Peru. And in this census, 22,000 said that they were Nikkei. However, only people above 12 years old were answering the census, and they were asked about how they felt. Therefore, the actual number of Nikkei should be larger than this number. Third example is Acta de Lima, or the Lima Agreement. This year, on July 1st, the APJ carried out a meeting among Nikkei leaders on the theme of preserving and promoting ancestors' values. And at that occasion, the Lima Agreement, made up of 14 points, was compiled. The Federation of Nikkei Association of Argentina, La Paz Nippon Jinkai of Bolivia, the Brazilian Japanese Association, as well as the Chile Central Nippon Jinkai, and the Federation of Nippon Jinkai of Paraguay, as well as APJ, took part in this meeting. And the second meeting will be held in São Paulo, Brazil in 2023. Article 8 of this agreement said that in order to promote the Nikkei value within the community, learning about the history, Japanese, as well as Japanese culture is important. And so within the Nikkei society, we need to collaborate so that the next generation can learn about the immigration history. And also, Article 9 said that the Nikkei society will continue these activities. So from these examples, you can understand that the Nikkei society activities were carried out on anniversary years through events and many publications. And also the Nikkei media and Nikkei leaders collaborated across borders. And also the Nikkei organizations collaborated with the Kenjinkai. We also had the cooperation of Japanese government and also the capitals of prefectures. I believe they also contributed so that people will not forget the history of Nikkei. But of course, we need to update the history as we hand it down through generations. And in order for people to learn about the Nikkei history here in Japan, I believe the Nikkei leaders here in Japan and their community and also the media must work together. Especially communities where many Nikkei people live, and also many social organizations should take part. And the media also will play a major role in having many people know about Nikkei. And also educational institutions, their contribution will also be key. So these four actors must work together. I believe that would be best in promoting the Nikkei history. Lastly but not least, I will continue to try to communicate the immigration history to many people as possible. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Ito-san. You have described how Nikkei systematically produced publications and used means such as social media to disseminate information about Nikkei. And the history, the manga about the history of Nikkeis have been distributed at one school, and we would like to hear later about whether it has appeared at other schools. And next, Mr. Morimo. I am Morimo Takeo. I taught at Chuo University until March this year. And my area of specialty is multicultural communication and education. And through such experiences, I got involved in developing curriculums for immigrant education. And today I would like to talk about the significance of learning about Nikkei immigrants. And I would like to talk about the educational efforts being made by the JICA Yokohama Museum of Overseas Migration, where I work. And in why immigrant immigration is important is because in the era of globalization, it is an important take in addressing global issues. And now, amid the advancing globalization, the phenomenon of migration is an important component in learning about global issues at school. And through the transnational movement of people resulting from globalizations, countries are becoming more multicultural and multiracial. And globalization and multiculturalization are now happening in tandem. And let's think about the meaning or what meaning there is in learning about Nikkei migrants. I am presenting here 4 perspectives. First, the fundamental theme of the Museum of Overseas Migration is Participation in a New World. That was the title of a lecture given at an international symposium to mark the 70th anniversary of Japanese immigration to Brazil by Professor Umesao Tadao, who was then the head of the National Museum of Ethnology. By learning about the Japanese immigrants' participation in a new world, we can think about the assistance and contributions that can be made by the Japanese to the international community. That is the first significance. Secondly, immigrants as minorities in their host countries have been exposed to threats to their basic human rights, including freedom, equality, and equity. Therefore, learning about immigrants provides an excellent opportunity to think about the strain and adjustments in the relationship between the basic human rights of immigrants, defined as outsiders by the nation-state, and national sovereignty. It is an opportune occasion for a citizenship education where people learn about the fundamental principles of democracy and social justice, including human rights in a multicultural society and citizenship. Thirdly, immigrant culture is characterized by its diasporic nature as well as its hybridity. It is a hybridity resulting from the mixing of the culture of the immigrant's homeland and the culture of the host country. The hybrid culture is constantly fluid, creating a new culture. The food culture of immigrants is a typical example. This shows spam musubi from Hawaii and the mixed plate. Conventionally in schools, in learning about understanding towards other cultures, the culture of a particular country of an ethnic group was framed as something inherently homogeneous or non-historical. It is undeniable that this results in instilling stereotypes in students about other cultures. Now, in this era of migration, with the whole world becoming the scene of diasporic movement, to learn about cultures from the perspective of hybridity will be important in overcoming fixed notions of nationality, ethnicity, and the cultures associated with them. Fourthly, in the process of adapting to their host country, many children of immigrants experience a sense of their identity wavering between their homeland roots and their host country. In particular, there are children, through the discrimination and hostility they face in the host countries, there are children who lose confidence in their roots or even try to reject their roots. So learning about the history of the contributions of immigrants, including their own families, to the New World, and the culture that their ancestors strove to carry on, will lead to establishing their identities. Next, I would like to speak about the activities of the JICA Museum of Overseas Migration, which supports learning about immigrants, the meaningfulness of which I have so far mentioned. The Museum of Overseas Migration is the largest of its kind in Japan. And as the director explained, since its opening in 2002, It has engaged in various educational activities to promote among the younger generation learning about Japanese overseas migration. As one of the academic members of the museum, I have been involved in the educational programs. Earlier, Hijikata-san spoke about what was written in textbooks. The museum was mentioned in the 6th grader social studies textbook published by Tokyo Shoseki in 2010. In 6th grade social studies, students are to learn about several countries with close ties to Japan in a unit about international understanding. This 2010 textbook carries an example of a Brazil Shimbun, or Brazil newspaper, produced by children who visited the museum and decided to compile the results of their learning in the form of a small newspaper. At the Museum for Overseas Migration, we developed teaching materials to assist the children's learning. This is an educational kit that we provide elementary and junior high school students who visit the museum. It is called Passport. The kit includes easy-to-understand reading materials on the history of Japanese overseas migration and worksheets that they can fill in and work on while they tour the museum. For children, immigration and immigrants and migration are not as interesting as, for example, robots or dinosaurs. To enable children to take an interest in the subject of immigrants and immigration, we made karuta cards. Our first edition of immigrant karuta cards were made to teach Japanese children who were taught nothing about immigrants at school about Japanese overseas migration. That was the initial purpose. However, unexpectedly, we found out that there were many teachers who were using the karuta as a Japanese language teaching material for Nikkei Brazilians and other Nikkei. So we came up with a Japan-Brazil immigrant karuta, which are about Japanese immigrants to Brazil, so that it can be used in Japanese language education for Nikkei. In this set of karuta, for the first-time Japanese language learner, all of the non-picture cards were written in hiragana, and we printed explanations on the back of the picture cards. In Brazil, actually, there is also the Kyoiku kado, the education cards produced for the purpose of Japanese language learning by Shinichi Numata of the Paraná Japan-Brazil Cultural Alliance. We also made kamishibai storytelling sequential picture panels. As I have written on the slide, kamishibai is suitable for all ages. They are easy to understand, useful for conveying information, and do not require much manpower. They are an excellent form of teaching material. The museum has produced 4 sets of kamishibai, 2 about immigrants to Hawaii, 1 presenting an overview of overseas migration, and 1 about the life of Brazilian people living in Japan. There are also sugoroku board games, board games using dice, made about immigrants to Brazil and Paraguay. The Brazilian sugoroku was made by Mr. Kojima Shigeru of this museum, and the Paraguay sugoroku was made by the School for Japanese and Asociación, with which I have ties. I cannot go into details about how to use the sugoroku and other materials, so I will leave it at this. To enable as many schools as possible to use these teaching materials, we have prepared what we call Imin Toranku, immigration suitcase, an outreach package that includes teaching materials and other resources selected according to the focus of the teaching. We deliver a wide range of materials to schools responding to the requests from the teachers who are to do the teaching. Teachers can apply through the museum's website to rent these materials free of charge. We have also produced a manual for learning activities for teachers. The manual includes guidance for teachers who bring their students to the museum and a different manual for classroom activities for students who cannot actually come to the museum because they are too far away. We have proposed explicit proposals and ideas for teachers on how to enable learning on immigrants among students from upper elementary school to high school. Teachers can design their classes based on these proposed plans. We have also produced a class plan that closely collaborates with and uses the Museum for Japan Overseas Migration. We have indicated that in learning about immigrants, students can learn about both the transnational movement of people as well as the symbiosis of different cultures within a single country or region resulting from that transnational movement. We have defined questions for students to find answers to, what specifically they should learn about in line with those questions, and ways to express the results of their learning and demonstrate their performance level. Lastly, I would like to say that the JICA Museum for Japanese Overseas Migration welcomes its 20th anniversary this fiscal year. To commemorate the occasion, the exhibits have been revamped and renewed for the first time since its opening. I would like to speak about the challenges in our education program that accompany the renewal of our exhibits. First, because the exhibits have been renewed, we need to revise the teaching manuals for teachers accordingly. Currently, I lead the team that has started the revision work as one of the museum's academic research projects. Secondly, until now, the teaching materials offered by the museum were mainly printed materials or physical teaching materials and exhibits. But with the advancement of IT in school classroom teaching, the museum faces the challenge of needing to develop digital teaching materials. As the first step in this endeavor, we have started to convert into animated video one of our existing kamishibai picture panels. Thirdly, the greatest problem with immigrant learning is that the teachers who teach it do not have sufficient knowledge and understanding of immigration and immigrants. Therefore, once we have finished developing new teaching materials, we are planning a teachers training program that will use those new materials. Thank you very much for your attention. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Morimo-san. So why is immigration education important? I believe you have given us a clear explanation, and also you have a lot of rich teaching materials. Thank you very much for telling us about that. And now we have heard from all four panelists. And now, for the remainder of the time, we would like to entertain questions from the viewers. And I don't think I should summarize what we have heard, but if I may, I would like to pose the first question. Especially under the pandemic, the people here in Japan and the Nikkei people overseas utilized IT tools to connect with each other. And I think we learned about the possibilities of using IT tools for making connections. And this panel discussion, when we think about the topic, the possibilities of online connection, what can we expect going forward? And Miyazawa-san, you have talked about online connections with Fukasawa-san in São Paulo. You have given us an example of a good practice case. So anything from anyone? So anyone can start. Well, then I am Miyazawa. So we used Zoom to speak to Fukasawa-san. And I think we learned about many things that we can do through Zoom. Joy Yamaguchi-san talked about what she's doing with her museum in the United States, but we realized the potential that these IT tools have. What I want to focus on in our classes is that meeting actual people is important, I believe. But near our school, we don't have Nikkei people, but in order to get connected with the Nikkei people, I believe utilizing Zoom is one way. I think there is great potential in using such tools. So that's one thing I would like to think about. Thank you very much. Anybody else?
As Mr. Miyazawa just said, to meet actual immigrants, for children to conduct dialogue with immigrants is very important. I agree. But realistically speaking, when you are trying to teach a class, there is the problem of the time difference. At this museum, we have videos of interviews of immigrants. And one of the challenges for this museum going forward is to share such resources with students and schools. And in Brazil and Peru, at the other end, there are good museums of about Japanese immigrants. So if we can share each other's resources by electronic means, that would be very good. And today I talked about the various educational resources at the museum. So if there were some way to share them, that would be very good. Anything to add to that? Due to my work with the Nikkei and Japanese Abroad Association, I participate in programs about educating the next generation. And there is learning about immigrant matters. And for Nikkeis living in Japan, they were able to interact here in Yokohama with students from other countries. And with the coronavirus, things had to go online. But even so, they were able to see what sort of place Yokohama was like, and they were able to see our renewed museum. So even if they are overseas, or excuse me, even if they're far away, they can still learn about immigrants by remote. And if you have anything to add, Hijikata-san. And there's also a question for Hijikata-san. You yourself, you learned about Nikkeis. Did you learn about Nikkei people in textbooks as a student? I will first answer the first part. As an employee of this association, our work is to inform Japanese people about Nikkei. And we work with Nikkei people. And we do work to foster in the Nikkei people themselves their identities as Nikkei. So we need to work on both ends. The second part of the question, it was many decades ago that I was a student, so I don't remember learning about Nikkei immigrants. So last year, over the whole year, I looked at a lot of textbooks, and I looked very hard for the mention of Nikkei in the textbooks. But they are very different from the textbooks that I used when I was a student.
So if you don't remember learning about Nikkei through textbooks, I believe there were no descriptions there. Now, from Australia, there is a question to Miyazawa-san. If you have written any articles or written any books, can you introduce them to me? Well, no, I don't have anything that I can introduce to you. I'm very sorry about that. And also another question to Miyazawa-san. You said that there aren't many Nikkei people in your area, but how? So it may, but it's may it's very important for children living in such areas to understand about the Nikkei. So the Nikkei education, do you hope to host such classes? Well, yes, I would love to have the opportunity to teach about it, but in Kyoto, there isn't a Nikkei community, but in Shiga Prefecture, a neighboring prefecture, I am hoping that I can visit there. And when I was working for Kobe newspaper, there were some classrooms of Brazilian Nikkei, and I'm hoping that I could help in classes like that, but there aren't any communities around me. I hope I answered the question. Next to Ito-san and to myself, the countries like Peru and Brazil that accepted Japanese immigrants, are there any textbooks teaching about these immigrations? So who should answer first? Well, I went to a Nikkei school. So yes, especially during the 100th anniversary, we were taught about the immigration history. But in college, when I studied history there, the class taught about Nikkei immigration. Therefore, I believe that ordinary schools would be teaching about the immigration in Nikkei. Well, from myself, I'd like to talk about Brazil, but I wonder, according to what I remember, I went to a public school in São Paulo, but in Tomiyasu, in the northern part of Brazil, Nikkei people contributed to growing pepper. I believe that was mentioned in the textbook. So yes, there were some descriptions of Nikkei people in the school textbooks. And other than school textbooks, for education in the broader sense, as Ito-san has said, in 2008, Japan, Brazil celebrated the 100th anniversary of Japanese immigrants. And I believe these anniversary events are big opportunities because you gain this momentum of making sure that the educational institutions will teach about the immigrants.
Next, there's a question for Mr. Morimo. To spread more widely education about immigrants and to promote such education, what is the most important? It's a large question, but from my experience, I can say that the most important thing is for teachers who teach to have sufficient information about immigration and immigrants. That is the biggest challenge and the most important. Until now, the teachers themselves did not learn at school very much about Japanese immigration overseas. And in the teachers' environments and families, they had little opportunity to learn such things. So the teachers themselves, through training and other means, need to learn more about immigrants and immigration. As I said before, with the new resources accompanying the renewal of the museum and the new teaching materials that will be developed, we're planning to hold training programs for teachers as well. Thank you very much. And next, there is a question for Hijikata-san. in Japanese textbooks, after Nikkei communities around the world were mentioned, did more Japanese people become aware of the existence of Nikkei communities around the world? This is a question from the Philippines. I myself conducted research on textbooks, and giving this presentation today, I felt a little awkward because I myself am not an educator. I conducted a survey, but I was not quite confident about how to answer when I was asked questions about textbooks. And I planned to get Professor Mori to help me if I got such questions. And for results to be produced by including something in a textbook, that takes time. But I was asked a question about if I remembered Nikkei immigrants being mentioned in the textbooks that I made, and unfortunately I did not. But I believe that the attitudes towards learning and awareness among academics also is changing. I hand this over to Mr. Morimo. About 15 years ago, when I had a project on immigrant education, the textbooks at that time, there were not as many, but I studied how often or how much mention there was made of immigrants in these textbooks. And having heard Hijikata-san's presentation today, I realized that there is much more mention made now than 15 years ago. Amid globalization, there is a lot more transnational movement of people. And with this background, that encourages textbooks mentioning more the subject of immigrants. However, whether this is a global trend or not, we do not know. And if Japanese immigrants are known throughout the world, that is questionable. After the next one is a question to all of you, and I'm not sure which one of you will answer. This is a question from Mexico. To make this subject more attractive, is it possible to use virtual reality and other technologies? What do you think of the use of such technologies, and have such technologies actually been used? This is a very interesting question.
ゲーム的にね、
So, using virtual reality like a game, maybe we can have children experience the immigration experience through games about how to overcome hardships they face. But is that being done right now? Actually, no. And Professor Morimo mentioned that, yes, descriptions in textbooks are increasing. In the past, you only had small descriptions, but now you have a lot of photographs as well. And also, I think you have more explanations accompanying these pictures as well. But is this leading to the children becoming more aware of Nikkei people? I really don't know. But here in Japan, when you meet Nikkei people, I think people will be reminded about what they've read in the textbook, and that may be a starting point for people to become more interested about Nikkei. Not just the students, but also the teachers. I'm hoping that if we can change the mindset in that way, that would be really good. Well, for Miyazawa-san, there is another question here. In Japan, for themes that are not included in the curriculum guidelines, how much can a teacher teach if it is not in the course of study? Well, what's included in the course of study is the actual main part of the education, and I believe the teachers have a free hand on how to teach that. And if something is included in the textbook, it will be easier to approach that subject. I'm not really sure if I can say this, but if you want to teach about Nikkei, you can say that it's in the textbooks, that's why I'm teaching it. And if it's not in the textbook, it may be difficult to approach. So how much would you teach about this subject? I think it's up to the teacher. But I think the course of study does mention about the immigration, the history of it does talk about multicultural coexistence. Therefore, I believe it is good to teach about this. Now, the course of study only touches upon the minimum essence, according to the Ministry of Education. And on top of that, the teachers are free to add more. So I believe that we need to approach the teachers so that they will teach more about Nikkei. I believe that would be more effective. Well, yes, it's not just the textbooks, but in order for the textbooks to have these descriptions, the textbooks follow the course of study. So I believe the best way to do this is to have the course of study mention immigration and Nikkei. Then it would be included in the textbooks. So I believe we should approach the people who create the course of study to have them have knowledge about Nikkei and immigration, and also the textbook publishers. We should approach them as well. I believe that those will be the ways to make sure that textbooks do mention immigration and Nikkei.
思い出したんですけど、僕
And I remembered one thing. I have a question from Ito-san. There is a publication, La Gran Aventura, and that is being provided to the Nikkei schools. But it should be actually distributed to other public schools and private schools. Have you had such opportunities? This goes back 20 years, but in the Nikkei schools, to the students this was distributed. And I would like to add that at the time of the 100th anniversary, it was big news that the Peruvian the Peruvian president was a Nikkei person. And that did a lot of publicity for Nikkei immigrants. I see. And there is a question for Mr. Ito. The identity of the Nikkei immigrants living in Japan, they have a complicated identity. Do you do any work regarding that? This is not restricted to Brazil, but so I could not talk about what I did as a Nikkei, but the reason I came to Japan is that I was a former journalist and I came to Japan to study. And I did research on Japanese immigrants and the Nikkei identity at the grad school here. And my dream was that my grandfather, when the 75th anniversary of Japanese immigration to Peru came, he was the president of a Nikkei newspaper in Peru. And he was deeply involved in that. And my dream was to succeed my grandfather's efforts by writing articles about Nikkei in both Spanish and Japanese. So I work with Nikkei people living in Japan, and I am doing work with a lot of Latin American people. But in the future, I would like to use my skills as a journalist and update a book about Nikkei immigrants. Thank you. And due to the time factor, we are now on the last question. This is a question for Hijikata-san. And the fundamental subject of this panel is textbooks. And the question for Ms. Hijikata is, what was the greatest challenge in conducting your survey on textbooks? I have the privilege of answering the last question. I'm not sure if I'm the suitable person to do so, but the challenge was that I had to go through, the research had to go through everything so that we did not miss anything. We went through the textbooks with our eyes. It's the human eyes. So I'm still worried about if we missed anything or not. So in order to avoid accidents, we had multiple people looking through the textbooks. So I think we did a pretty good job. And as the Association of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad, the challenge is to go forward reflecting all the views and ideas sent in to us by viewers today. And we need to make progress one step at a time, reviewing our mission and trying to get better. And I would like to make my concluding remarks in just 1 minute. So I will, the four of you can use the remaining time to have your last word. If there is something you need to say, you forgot to say, please take this opportunity to do so. Thank you.
네.
So, to conclude, of course, when we say learning and teaching activities, I believe we have understood that there are many different ways to approach this, and there are things that we can expect from education, and also there are some things that the Nikkei society and Nikkei people themselves should actively do. I believe we were able to confirm those points. And the survey of the association that we've heard, and also, well, actually we are here for this online panel, the JICA Japanese Overseas Migration Museum. I hope that this would also be utilized by many. And I would like to thank the questions that you've sent in, and also the good practices that were shared here from the panelists. I do hope that this would serve as hints for everyone's future activities. And with that, thank you very much once again to all the viewers. And with this, we'd like to conclude this panel. Thank you very much. With that, we conclude panel discussion 2. Thank you very much once again to all the panelists. So we hope that the conclusions of the 2 panel discussions will lead to future activities. And now we would like to close the convention, and after the convention closes, there will be a questionnaire sheet that will appear. We hope that you can give us your feedback, and we would like to hear about what you expect in future conventions. So lastly but not least, we would like to have our President Katsuyuki Tanaka to say a few words in closing. I am the president of the Association of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad. My name is Tanaka. And thank you very much for joining us for this 62nd convention of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the moderators and the panelists, as well as the commentators who made this convention successful. Now this year, just like last year, we are having this online convention. It was sad that we had to have it this way, but and we have 4 languages being used here. It's technically very difficult. And I was worried about how the convention would go, but I'm really happy and relieved that things went very smoothly. Now, in this convention, we were taking up the sustainable development of Nikkei communities and Japan. Yesterday and today, I believe it gave you some hints to think about the sustainable development and the possibility of sustainable development of the Nikkei community. Or maybe you would want to ask me about what I think. Well, frankly speaking, I felt very positive as I listened to the discussions and presentations here. And there were many things that gave me an aha moment as I listened. I would like to pick up some highlights. For example, in the first panel discussion, we have heard about upgrading the Nikkei community programs and projects. We have heard that from our panelists. But including that, and also under COVID-19, we have seen that many Nikkei communities have turned online. And one thing that is clear is that starting this year, the Matsuri festivals are coming back. Yesterday, His Imperial Highness the Crown Prince Akishino also mentioned that the Matsuri festival and Undokai sports events being held in person, not virtually. And that has started from this year. And he said that he was very happy about that. And yes, indeed, we heard about more Matsuri events taking place in person. For example, in Los Angeles, the Nisei Week and the Japan Festival in Sao Paulo, in New York and Vancouver. For the first time in 2 or 3 years, these festivals are taking place. And this is something that we can celebrate. And of course, these festival events attracts many people. And we can communicate about the Japanese culture from all kinds of aspects. And also, it doesn't just attract people, but it's a fundraising opportunity. So in order to revitalize the Nikkei society, I believe these events are very important. And yesterday, we heard reports from Nikkei societies of several countries. We heard from many young people. And they were saying that the youth understand that they have a role to play. So many youth and young people have that idea that they have a role to play, and also they want to connect with other Nikkei societies in other countries and other regions. And it is encouraging to see that the young people are very active. My third point is yesterday we heard a keynote speech by Professor Ninomiya in Brazil. And towards the end of his presentation, Professor Ninomiya said that the Nikkei people in Brazil, about 700,000 of them, have experience living in Japan. And this is very important for the vitalization of Nikkei society. Because of the change in the immigration law, now people up to Sansei can come to work in Japan. However, the conditions for the Yonsei to get visa is very strict, which means that the Yonsei people may not be able to gain experience living in Japan. He said that he hopes the visa conditions for Yonsei will be eased as soon as possible so that many Yonsei people can come to Japan. Looking at the situation from Japan, the Nikkei organization and Nikkei communities abroad, when you try to revitalize them, what are the issues now? Not having income resources, or the membership is declining. But how to deal with these situations? I believe many people will approach the problem like that. But Professor Ninomiya said that looking at the past, the 700,000 people who have experience living in Brazil and as well as in Japan, I believe having such people is the key in vitalizing the Nikkei society. I believe he was sending out that message. And that is a perspective that he had by looking at this issue from Brazil. And also the textbook survey on Nikkei and immigration. This survey was carried out by the Association for the first time, but we found that there were a lot of textbook descriptions. I'm not really sure that this is encouraging news to the Nikkei people, but in the panel, I believe the panelists said that it's not just about what is written in the textbook, but it's also about the teachers' awareness in teaching and taking up the subject. I believe this is a very important point, because the Japanese textbooks, many of them only mention about Nikkei in 1 or 2 lines. And just reading those few lines, it will not ensure that the student remembers about that. That's what I thought as I remembered how I read textbooks in my school days. Now, I would like to ask you for your understanding on one point. Usually on the second day of the convention, we compile a declaration. However, we were unable to prepare a declaration and gain the approval of many organizations. Therefore, just like last year, we will not be compiling a declaration. Instead, at a later date, we will upload on our website an outline report of the 62nd convention. So therefore, I would like to ask you for your understanding on that point. And with this, we would like to conclude the 62nd Convention of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad. Thank you very much for your participation, and let's hope that we can meet you in person next year in Tokyo. Thank you very much, Mr. Tanaka. So with this, we would like to end the 62nd Convention of Nikkei and Japanese Abroad, brought to you online over 2 days. And thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. And next year, for the 63rd convention, let's hope that we can meet in person. And until then, goodbye.